And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. And thank you so much for helping us grow. We hit 2,095 subscribers today, and we grow every day thanks to people like you who watch and like our videos and subscribe to our channel. It means the world to us. We have a fantastic guest today. We have author and violinist Aria Miner joining us, and she has had a wonderful career as a violinist in the prestigious Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and most recently as an author and a writer and a journalist, and someone who covers opera and is writing some really wonderful fiction. Welcome, Aria Miner.
Thank you, Jason. It's so much fun to be here with you again. I'm delighted.
We had some technical issues on that. Sorry about that, but it's great to have you back. And how are things on the left coast?
Things on the left coast are fine. Pretty quiet at the moment, but you know Seattle, you wait a minute and it'll change.
Certainly a great town, and some great opera happening there too.
Yeah, we've been really lucky this last couple of seasons, and we have a lot to look forward to next season as well.
Fantastic. So you you have an incredible journey, a life journey. So why don't you shared this on the last show, but just give us you give us some of the high points of this journey and the how you've come to write these incredible books.
Well, it never occurred to me that I would end up playing at the Metropolitan Opera except when I was growing up. My mom always listened to the Met radio broadcasts every Saturday, and it kind of filtered in. But my emphasis as a kid was on solo violin and then on orchestra playing. What happened was when I was very young, I married an opera conductor. So that kind of pointed me in a certain direction. And I started playing opera in New York, and one of the Met conductors, Stuart Bedford, came to one of our performances and heard me play. It was Benjamin Britten's The Rape of Lucretia, so it had a lot of solo violin playing in it. And he invited me to come down to the Met and audition for Raymond Yevek, who was the concertmaster of the orchestra. And interestingly, Ray had me sight read the prelude to the third act of Siegfried. And
Wow.
because I had listened to these recordings endlessly with my then husband, and kind of nailed it. And he pretty much hired me on the spot. So that very first part of the journey was my first rehearsal, when I sat down in the first violin section and I looked up on stage, and there were John Vickers and Martina Arroyo, and on the podium was James Levine. And I thought, boy, talk about starting out with a trial by fire. But it turned out the trial by fire was that season they were doing the entire ring. So that,
Wow.
in fact, it was the first complete ring that they had done since the 1961-62 season. So I'd say it was mostly a blessing. And I had the good fortune to be learning that with Sixten Ehrling, who was incredibly knowledgeable. He was a great conductor. He was very meticulous about details. So for me as a neophyte, was a great way to learn the ring note by note and measure by measure. So it was all terrible.
We talk about trial by fire. You've got the the ring fire, the magic fire. It's fantastic.
Being in fire, yeah, I got the whole picture. But I consider myself very lucky to have had that experience and to play in that orchestra with that concertmaster Ray Nevik, he was our rock. He was just the greatest. He never ever missed. He always was someone we could depend on. And so it was all very exciting. It was all very hard work. Those ring operas are, if you think the operas are long, just think about the rehearsals.
We were talking in the pre-show how when the other Broadway musicians and the New York Philharmonic are going home, you guys are still another hour or so in the pit. So by the time they're home, by the time you're finishing up your show.
Yeah, the Philharmonic guys used to laugh at us when we'd kind of meet up in that tunnel, in between Lincoln Center's the Met and the Philharmonic, and there would be this sign on the wall saying, "What are the end times of the Philharmonic and this theater and that theater and the Met?" And the Met was always like midnight, and the Philharmonic was like 10 p.m. And they'd kind of wave at us and say, "Bye, have fun, see you later." You know?
Wow, that's so fantastic. So Now we'll fast forward to your newest book, and it takes place in the pit of the Met. So that must be something you can immediately identify with, those nerves of the character. And
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to admit the protagonist is based on me when I was first starting out in my 20s and young and idealistic and all that. But she gets into a lot of trouble. She has a penchant for that. And a lot of the things that happen are based on certain nefarious goings on that happened at the Met while I was there. And somebody, I don't know if you know Richard Stilwell, but he's a wonderful baritone who sang all over the world, including the Met. And he's read my book and he said, "You have such a wicked imagination." So I guess my wicked imagination took hold and I fabricated fiction out of those real situations. And the next thing I knew, I was killing off all the people who made my life miserable.
well, that's certainly a way to do it.
So much fun. I can't begin to tell you.
So now you've written several books before. What's it like to be in your, like, as a third or fourth novel?
It's actually, I just counted, it's my sixth.
Wow.
But I started out writing romance and then I wrote some young adult fiction. And then I got inspired by the Met to start writing mysteries. And Aria for Murder is actually the first in a brand new series called the Julia Kogan Opera Mystery Series. So Julia Kogan is the protagonist. And I named her, interestingly, her first name after the daughter of my best friend in the women's chorus at the Met, Julia. And the last name is from a very famous violinist named Leonid Kogan, who was kind of in that generation with Nation Milstein and Heifetz and Oyster. And I thought, what a combination of names. So Julia Kogan has now put her name to this series. And it starts right off on her first night playing her debut performance at the Metropolitan Opera and all that entails. And the characters, now some people ask me if the characters are actual real people that I worked with at the Met. And the answer to that is, for the most part, they're based on people I knew at the Met. They're combinations of, different characteristics of different people kind of poured all into one character, with the exception of one who I based entirely on one character. And most of the people who knew this guy, may he rest in peace, recognized him immediately.
Well, that's hysterical. Wow.
I don't think he would mind. He's up there in heaven playing the violin. One of my favorite colleagues. So it's kind of a, homage to him, as it were. But mostly these books are homage to the world of opera. The first one, Aria for Murder, takes place at the Met. The next one, which I'm working on now, which comes out in September, which I haven't yet revealed the title, but I'm going to soon,
Ooh.
takes place at Santa Fe Opera. So Santa Fe, and that was actually because one of my readers from the first book suggested Santa Fe. It's such a unique place. Have you been to Santa Fe Opera?
I have. I went a couple of 4 or 5 years ago. It was before COVID. 4 years before COVID, I went to see one of the shows, and the moon rises up over the desert and through the stage. I mean, what an incredible place to go see an opera, and what an incredible place that they have to do such magical work there.
It is magical. It's absolutely unique. The whole atmosphere of those mountains and weather and things happen there that, because it's outdoors, although thankfully at this point, after having built 3 theaters, the first one burned down. I mean, that's a story in of itself. But now they have it all pretty much covered over, but it's open at the sides and at the top, so you can see the moon rising, and it's very magical. But on the other hand, you're kind of exposed to the elements. So if a storm is brewing, and it tends to do that in Santa Fe without any notice whatsoever, then boom, you've got thunder and lightning and, whoosh, rain and wind, and it's all this crazy stuff that goes on. So I thought, and plus Santa Fe has the most ghosts of any place in the whole United States. So I thought,
I know that. That's interesting.
Really? So what a great atmosphere. There's ghosts and there's, thunder and lightning and opera and people getting killed. So yeah, it's going to be an awful lot of fun. I'm having so much fun working on it.
I tell people that a lot of the drama on the opera happens backstage. There's so many people, and there's just so many things happening, and each of the stagehands has their culture. The orchestra has their culture. There's so much interesting dynamic backstage that the audience never gets to see.
Well, that's another reason why I write these books. There are anywhere up to 1,000 people working at the Met at any given time. And so, of course, you're going to have a lot of ego conflict and people at war with each other, and even within certain cross sections, like take the orchestra, for instance, which is what I know the best. The way I like to describe the Met Orchestra is 100 neurotic musicians thrown together in a hole in the ground with no light and no air, 7 days a week, days, nights, and weekends. You see more of these people than you see of your own families. Sooner or later, someone's going to want to kill someone. There you have it.
So it was the conductor who dies in the book, right?
In the first book, yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, and I have a couple of colleagues who also write murder mysteries in the classical music world, and we all kind of get together and talk about the fact that, yeah, the first thing we do is talk about which conductors we're going to kill. No offense,
None taken. It's for me, it's always this. It's usually these challenges, and the conductor's got to work about. I run some of those companies, small companies, and I have to do the hiring and the managing and the conducting, and it's. I can understand, believe me.
Yeah, well, and it's a kind of love-hate relationship. I mean, there are conductors you absolutely love, like Carlos Kleiber and Bernhard Haitink, and this is the kind of thing that inspires you. And of course, Leonard Bernstein, and of course, Levine, who was, our full-time boss. But there are others whose names I will not mention who make you absolutely crazy. And you're like, oh, please.
They make a very difficult job already harder, right?
Yes, they really do. Maybe they don't know it. I'm not sure. But, and I shouldn't say this, but you have to have a certain amount of ego to be a conductor, to get up there. And I know because I've done conducting, and it's an incredibly powerful feeling to get up there in front of 100 people and be able to tell them all what to do. I mean, how great.
Someone's got to do it, right?
Someone's got to do it, and some do it very well. So, the ones who do it very well inspire us and are unforgettable. So
you say you worked with Carlos Kleiber, one of my heroes. What was it like to work with him? Wow.
Oh, it was a dream. I mean, it's very rare for a conductor to not have to do anything in the way of beating. I mean, he never had to beat anything. He just did everything with his facial gesture, with his eyes, with a little bit of movement here and a little bit of movement there. He had a magical quality, speaking of magic, that just came across effortlessly, and it just kind of enveloped you, and you just wanted to do anything he asked.
I've only seen the videos, and boy, some of my favorite gesture vocabulary. I've watched everything I can find of his, and I'm just always amazed by his effortlessness and his just how organic his gesture was, and just fantastic to watch.
And such a great sense of the music and what made the music tick, and also of the singers, his rapport with the singers. I remember when we did Bohème with Mirella Freni, and she was very, I wouldn't say nervous because she was one of the greatest sopranos ever, but she was very concerned to make sure that everything was absolutely perfect. And all he had to do was smile and say, "Don't worry, we have it covered. It's going to be perfect." And it was.
There's a great video of him online. If something was going wrong and he's conducting the pit, and he goes, he like during a gesture, he's like a baritone missed counter or something. And he just goes, and it was just a hysterical video. It just shows how fast he thought and like just how quick his mind worked.
Yeah, the best conductors really have to have that quality. And he also was off the podium. He was wonderfully affable. You know, he spoke with us and hung out, and no pretentiousness whatsoever. But if someone tried to tell him what to do, and I will not name any names, in the middle of a rehearsal, he simply was like, no, I am running this show, and he was.
Any other tensions that have found their way into the story that come from reality? I know. Certainly from either the directors and the singers, and there can be tension with the staging with the singers, and that's always a friction point. Can be certainly.
Well, certainly, because again, you have all these egos. On the one hand, you have the stagehands, complaining about why should I have to move this timpani, and then you've got your little mini dramas in the pit, and then you have these major dramas on stage where Pavarotti is like, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, I shouldn't have to be required to sing, or something like that, or some other Italian soprano who says, I did not get my shoes from Italy, they were special ordered for me and they were not here, I cannot sing, and it goes on, and it happens in performances. I'll never forget when we were doing Louisa Miller, and it was a new production for Scotto, and she had done an interview with Opera News that previous week, in which, for some unfathomable reason, she said, I am a greater singer than Callas. Well, you can imagine every
quite Callas a statement
came out to this, and this performance, which was being recorded, but actually being shown live from Lincoln Center. And sure enough, when she came out for her first aria, and it's a major aria, and there's a major stop in the orchestra after the introduction, and a pause, and just as she opened her mouth to sing, this voice came shouting from the balcony, Viva Callas!
Oh no.
Seeing the look on her face, I felt bad for the poor, TV videographer that, there was a look that could kill. But it happened like it was a millisecond, and then she launched into the aria and sang it better than ever. I mean, she's a real pro, no question.
Oh yeah, real artist. This is the 100th year of Maria Callas. I'm involved in several Maria Callas projects. It's pretty exciting. Imagine 100 years of since her birth.
Wow, that's amazing. 1923. Well, I never had a chance to sing with her, but certainly I have studied her and all of her recordings. And when it comes to Tosca, nobody comes close. I mean, that scene where she, stabs Scarpia, you feel it right in your gut. I don't know that quality, how she did it, but she makes you feel everything that's happening in the opera.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest visceral artists. My friend covered her. A friend of mine it was Eleanor Ross covered her at, I guess it was La Scala. And she got to go on for a rehearsal. She wasn't feeling well. And the story was that she heard her singing. She's like, that one will never come back here again.
Hard act to follow.
She was a mercurial artist, certainly, but wow, her stage performance is so thrilling.
She's immortal.
Immortal. One of the legends in our field.
Yeah, and there are many.
So what do you have to say to people who say that the opera, I hear this all the time, that the greatest ones lived back then, and are we in a golden age now? What do you see about opera these days?
I think opera these days inevitably is colored by the whole internet sensation. I mean, you cannot think about opera anymore without thinking about it in live HD, streaming online. Like, for instance, this latest Lohengrin production, which is amazing. As it happens, I'm giving a lecture for the Wagner Society in Los Angeles next week about Lohengrin. But the amount of play that's out there on this Lohengrin online, you see trailers, you see scenes, you see arias, you see a round table with the cast and the directors and the conductor. It's all about getting opera out there to as many people as possible, and I'm all for that. I think that's a great thing.
That is exciting, and that boy, that's generating such press with that opera, isn't it? Bashala, and I have a lot of friends who are in that, either in the auxiliary chorus or in the cast. It's going to be something very special.
I think it's amazing. And, you know, whatever you say about the production, the cast is fascinating. I mean, how they put, you know, Tamara Wilson and Christine Gerke and Piotr and, you know, it just, and of course, Yannick Nézet-Séguin is just a wonderful conductor. And I think that this is demonstrates the greatness of opera, that after, you know, and Lohengrin was part of the Met's very first season in 1883, you know, and in fact, there have been more um, performances of Lohengrin at the Met than any other Wagner opera since the beginning, something like 720 or something like that. So Lohengrin is really, really important to the Met, and I think they've been playing this up. So I'm delighted that it's coming across so well, and I'm just having a blast, you know, studying it and reliving all of those difficult. There's one especially difficult passage for the strings in Act 3, where you have to play without any rest whatsoever triplets at a very fast pace for 3 minutes and 38 seconds. That's a very long time. And in fact, there's a video out there of a rehearsal of the Met Orchestra playing that. And they pan through the orchestra and showing these poor string players trying not to have their bow arms fall off, you know. I remember those days very well.
Those are incredible passage work. I mean, and when you hear those pieces put all together, there's so much happening with the brass and the winds that sometimes you can't even hear all that playing. And it's some of the hardest playing, but sometimes it's buried into so much layering that those poor string players are just fighting against everything.
Oh yeah, we're definitely fighting. But I have to say, I remember it was a number of years ago. They put that passage on the audition for the principal second violinist. And everybody on the committee said, well, it doesn't matter what else is on the list. This is the one we're going to listen to. It's kind of a last man standing, you know, whoever could play the whole thing and still be standing upright. As it turns out, it was not separating the men from the boys, but the women from the girls. A woman won that audition. How about that?
For the first time in the history of the New York Philharmonic, they announced it was in the New York Times that they were more females than males. So this has been a historic year as well.
Amen to that.
Yep. I saw them. I was at the Tucker Gala this year, and I saw that they had a ton of women on the stage. It's good to see.
Well, opera lives. You know, I like to think of opera being here with us forever. Opera does something to the human soul that nothing else can do. It goes straight to your core. It goes to your gut. It goes to your soul. And it makes you feel things that nothing else can make you feel. And I think that may be the most important reason why opera, knocking on wood, will be with us forever, is that quality. It doesn't matter whether the opera is 300 years old or 3 years old. I'm delighted to know that this country, aside from Germany, has more opera companies than any other country in the world. So opera is alive and well. And yes, a lot of these companies are small and regional, but somehow they're all collaborating to commission these new operas, which I think is wonderful. That is what is going to make us opera immortal, is that opera continues to engender new material all the time. There are always stories to tell, always. And what better way to tell them than in music?
I tell everyone that's universal human themes, right? It's those themes accompanied by great melodies and composers, and it just creates this magic that has been enduring since the 1600s.
Well, it's all about the emotion. You know, we go to the theater to have an emotional experience, and opera gives that emotional experience with the greatest music in the world.
And we've seen lots of challenges in the last 10, 15 years. COVID certainly was tough on every field, and certainly live classical music, but particularly hard on opera. And we've seen things like the Metropolitan Opera have to scale back their performances next year. But it's exciting to see the Lohengrin and Fire Shut Up My Bones, how they're really doing something new.
Yes, they are. Something old, something new. and always something fabulous. I think that people really value the Met. The Met is precious to all of us, and may it continue to be. I think that, in writing about opera, and I also do reviews of operas here, not wherever I am. And if I happen to be, in Seattle, I'll do an opera review there, or Boston, or whatever. I think that it's important to emphasize the fact that a review, to me, is not so much a review, but a telling of a story about a performance, and honoring the fact that in order to perform something that is so complex and takes so much work, and so many artists just put their lifeblood into, I think that it's important to show an appreciation of that in every review that I do.
And
So,
thank God you do, because there's so little reviewing being done because of the cutback in the newspapers. We've lost basically, like, I know I'm in New Jersey, and I started my career being reviewed by multiple publications, and now there's less and less of that. It's more just the blog posts these days that are doing it in the New York City area.
well, thank goodness for places like Broadway World and Bach Talk, and the ones that have an online presence.
Opera Wire has become huge in this region.
Those, see, again, online is so very important. The reach is so much further. And that's what helps keep all this alive. So during COVID, of course, everything had to be streamed. So it was an interesting experience, watching and writing at the same time, kind of a luxury. But I think that it should continue that way, that people are making such an effort. I know that in Seattle, so much of the opera was done online, and they had to do things with maybe one or two instruments and two pianos or something like that. But I give a lot of credit to the general manager here in Seattle, Christina Scheppelman, who said from the very beginning, whatever happens, I am going to keep this opera company going, even if it means, two singers and one instrument, and something in black and white instead of color, and no chorus, whatever it's going to be, we're going to keep it going. And she did. And now, they're back. So, people love opera that much. It's that important to them that no matter what, they kept it going. If you need to sing, then you have to sing.
And you think back in certainly in Europe and any of those times, I don't think opera was ever easy. When you read like Mozart's letters, and you read, they had the similar problems. Like, Don Giovanni was delayed twice. The premiere was delayed twice because of different. One was technical issue, one was staging issues. There's always challenges, but the arts seem to always kind of, the human creativity in the arts always seem to kind of rise above these, don't they?
I think that the creativity, you nailed it with that word, creativity. I think that's what COVID and the whole online presence was about. It made us be creative in ways that we never knew we could be creative. We had to somehow find a way to keep going, and it's all of our inner creativity and the collective consciousness of that. That's why we're still here today.
Well, that's fantastic. And now, when you put your books together, do you ever reach out to the Met, since a lot of the topics takes place there? Have you reached out to former colleagues and current people there? Or has that been the conversations been happening?
Oh, absolutely. I feel very blessed to be in touch with a number of colleagues, some of whom I performed with, some of whom are there now that I performed with are still there, some that weren't even there when I was there that I've become acquainted with through Facebook. And they have given me answers to questions like, is this still there? Is that still there? Because I've been away from that for quite a while. And so, yeah, they've helped me a lot with these updates and changes. And, it really is important to know what actually is the atmosphere on this very day and this very time. So I acknowledge my colleagues, and I always do that in the acknowledgement page of the book as well. They're very important to me, and I really appreciate how much they've helped me in writing these books. It's not easy to kind of conjure, you know, exactly what it was like then, although the memories, as you can tell, are quite vivid. But I could tell stories from now until, the day that I kick off, about my experiences there. But I'm enjoying doing it in writing, and the people who are reading it are enjoying it too, because they say things like, "We had no idea that went on back there." You know, is
There's a
that what it?
whole world, and everyone sees the stage, but there's a whole world, and each of these platforms is a different planet, and so interesting. And there's such vibrant people everywhere.
Yeah, and they make great characters. Believe me, I have so much fun creating these characters and making them make each other miserable. And whether they're conductors or directors or, well, I don't want to give too much away because I want everybody to read the books, but and the methods of murder. Oh, wow. I've been having a field day with that. I never knew I had such a wicked imagination until I started writing these. But yes, definitely, it's so much fun recreating that atmosphere and showing people what can go on. As they say, die Liebe brennt. That's what we used to say. There's no love lost between the stagehands and the orchestra, or any number of different factions. Because when you think about it, if you got 1,000 people working, in different jobs, you have stagehands and international opera stars and comprimario and chorus and ballet and orchestra and electricians all working to try and put on opera. It's amazing any music gets done at all, but it's done.
Well, there's so much magic to be made, and boy, so where can people go to buy this book and to check it out? And tell us, how can we find out more about you and where to buy those books?
Well, Aria for Murder is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and if you go on my website, which is ericaminer.com, there is a list of other places. There are certain bookstores where you can find it. In fact, autographed copies where I've done in-person book signings. And pretty much anywhere you can find a book, you can find Aria for Murder. If you have a favorite bookstore or even a favorite library, you can go and ask them to request that they keep a copy. So there are all kinds of different ways. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have a newsletter. There's a sign up for it on my website, ericaminer.com, where each month I send out news of what's going on, what's happening. You're the first people to know. They'll be the first people to know what the title is of the next book, what the release date is going to be, and all that good stuff.
Keep on creating incredible worlds and bringing people behind the curtain to these incredible artistic processes. And it's exciting to hear you're doing so well, and continued success and continued great music.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate this so much. It's so much fun to talk to you, and your questions are always so intriguing, and they make me a better person. And I
always learn from people like you who've been in the trenches and have been making art, and then you have such a joy of musical discovery that having a life in the arts and having a life behind the journalistic and the writing front is really fascinating. What you've done.
Well, I feel really lucky to have that creative outlet. That now that I'm no longer playing the violin, that I get to write about music. And what could be better? I get to write about it. I get to listen to it. I hear it in my head 24/7. It doesn't leave me alone. And all the better for it. Music is it, as Leonard Bernstein said, music is it.
Keep sharing your gifts with the world, and I look forward to having you on the show again soon.
Sounds great. There's another book coming. Thank you so much, Jason.
Fingers crossed. Look forward to hearing about it, and I'll be reading it too.
Thank you.
All the best. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. Hope you have a great day, and remember, keep music alive.